My name is Eveline Marsh. I am 68 years old, a retired school treasurer, and I live alone in a small Victorian house overlooking the bay in Port Townsend, Washington. 10 years have passed since my husband Henry died, and in that time I have learned to keep my life measured steady as the columns in an old ledger. I rise early, warm my tea twice, and water the hydrangeas before the ferry horn sounds across the harbor. Routine, I've discovered, is the closest thing to peace. That morning, the radio hummed a soft gospel tune while I stood on the porch, counting blossoms as if numbers could fill silence. The air smelled of salt and damp wood. Somewhere down the street, Mr. Bennett waved before disappearing behind his hedge, and I thought, briefly, how comfort comes in familiar motions. The telephone rang just as I set my cup on the counter. I almost let it go to the machine. Most calls at that hour were reminders or charity drives, but something in its second ring felt urgent. Mrs. Marsh, a man's voice asked, strained, breath catching like he had climbed stairs too fast. "This is Mason Dyer, the photographer from your daughter's wedding." I recognized his name at once. Clara's wedding had been half a year ago, a day wrapped in sunlight and champagne laughter. Mason had sent the photos weeks later. I had thanked him politely and tucked them away in an album labeled Our Girl's New Beginning. "Is everything all right?" I asked. He hesitated. "I heard paper rustle." "Maybe nerves, ma'am. I found something while organizing the digital proofs. I think you need to come to my studio alone." The kettle hissed behind me. I turned it off, but left it on the stove. "What kind of something?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Please. Mrs. Marsh, don't tell your daughter yet. You need to see this first." Then the line went quiet. I stood still. The receiver pressed against my ear until the dial tone hummed. Steam from the forgotten tea drifted upward, vanishing into the morning light. I set the cup down and glanced toward the framed photo on the mantel, Clara in lace, smiling at the man she'd promised forever to. "Henry," I whispered, wiping my damp hands on the kitchen towel. What could this be? And then I reached for my coat. I've lived in this house for 32 years, and it still moves to Henry's rhythm more than mine. He built the kitchen shelves himself, uneven but sturdy, and I've never had the heart to straighten them. Every morning, I keep our small world in balance, the same breakfast, the same notepad for grocery lists, the same ledger I once used at the school. Numbers calm me. They stay honest. By 9, I was seated at the kitchen table, adding figures for the church bazaar fund. The pencil's weight in my hand felt comforting. Steady. The kettle clicked off by itself, and I poured 1 cup of tea instead of 2. I still make enough for 2, though. Habit. Henry's photo sits near the ledger, a faint smile under his silver mustache. "Still keeping the books," I said softly, still trying not to make a mess of things. The phone buzzed once Clara. Her voice carried that mix of confidence and distraction she'd always had. "Mom, I'm in a meeting, but did you get the invite for the wine tasting next month Adrian's firm is hosting? You should come." "I'll think about it," I said, circling a figure in my ledger. "You'd like it, and maybe Adrian can look at your accounts. He's really good with Clara." I cut in gently. "Your father used to say, love and money should never share a pocket. I'll keep my own books." "Thank you." She laughed, a little too fast. "You and your rules, they keep me from losing what's left." I answered, half smiling. When the call ended, the house felt larger than before, quieter in a way that presses on the ribs. I went back to my sums, but the numbers blurred. Henry's pension checkbook lay open on the counter. I remembered signing a withdrawal 6 months earlier, the last payment for Clara's wedding, a fair amount. Saved over years, now transformed into white silk and rented lights. I closed the ledger carefully, aligning it with the table's edge. Some women pray to feel safe. I balance columns. Outside, The ferry horn sounded across the bay, steady, familiar, certain, yet somewhere deep inside, that certainty shifted, just a little. The memory still feels like a film I can't pause. The air smelled of salt and roses that afternoon near Bainbridge Island, where Clara's wedding unfolded beneath strings of pale lanterns. I remember the sound of the tide brushing the rocks below, the music soft enough that laughter floated over it. I wore Henry's pearl brooch pinned to my jacket. He had given it to me on our 40th anniversary, promising, "When you wear this, you'll never walk alone." That night, I swore I could feel him nearby, somewhere between wind and candlelight. Clara was breathtaking. Her hair caught the last bit of sunlight like spun gold. When she turned to me, her smile carried all the hope I'd ever wanted for her. "You've done enough, Mom," she said, holding my hands before the ceremony. "Please, just enjoy it." I tried. Truly, I did. Adrian moved through the guests like he'd been born for such occasions. Confident, smooth, shaking hands, remembering names. "Mom," he said when he found me by the buffet. "The flowers turned out perfect. You have wonderful taste." "Clara chose them," I replied. "I only signed the checks." He laughed softly, as if we shared a private joke. "You made all of this possible. You're family now." For a while, I believed him. I watched them dance, her dress catching in the grass, his hand firm at her waist. People whispered about how beautiful they looked together, how bright their future seemed. Later, as I stood near the open bar, I overheard Adrian speaking to a guest in a sleek gray suit. His tone shifted cooler. Practiced. "We'll expand the client list after the honeymoon," he said. "Older investors trust stability, and my new family gives exactly that impression." The man laughed, murmured something I couldn't catch. I turned away before either noticed me, telling myself I'd misheard. Ambition, I thought. Just ambition. When the music slowed, I stepped outside, needing air. The sea was dark, flecked with light from the dock. Behind me, applause swelled as they cut the cake. I touched the pearl brooch and whispered to Henry, "We did it. Love. She's happy." For a long time, I believed it was true. It looked like a fairy tale, until it wasn't. Mason's studio sat above a small bakery on Water Street. The smell of yeast and coffee rose through the stairwell as I climbed, my hand tight around the railing. When he opened the door, I saw a man who hadn't slept. His eyes were rimmed in red, his shirt wrinkled, his hands trembling slightly as he gestured me inside. "Mrs. Marsh," he said, voice low. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I answered. The room was dim, except for the light from a single lamp aimed at his computer screen. Prints were scattered across a long table, wedding photos. Smiles frozen mid-laughter. "I've been going through the raw files," he said, pulling up a folder. Something didn't sit right with me. My mother's face kept coming to mind. I frowned. "Your mother," he nodded. "She invested through a firm called Beckett and Wren Capital. Lost everything. She died last winter, thinking she'd failed herself." He swallowed hard. 2 nights ago, I recognized the name again. Adrian Beckett. He clicked the mouse. A photograph appeared Adrian in his wedding suit. Not on the dance floor, but near a service exit. His arm was wrapped around a woman in a pale dress. Her back was half turned, but I recognized her immediately. Celeste. I whispered, "Clara's co-worker." "Not just that," Mason said. "She's the Wren and Beckett and Wren, his partner. They've been running an unregistered investment pool targeting widows, retirees, anyone with savings." I felt my throat tighten. "You're saying I was next?" His answer came in a whisper. "Yes, ma'am. Your name was on one of their contact lists. I shouldn't have seen it, but I couldn't ignore it." The air felt heavier, thick with the scent of chemical developer and fear. I stared at the screen, at the man who had called me Mom. whose smile had seemed so certain. Mason reached for a tissue, not for me, but for himself. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought you should know before anyone else does." I nodded once, steady though my hands had begun to shake. "I appreciate your honesty," I said quietly. "Now show me everything you have." The drive home felt longer than the miles it took. Rain hung low over Port Townsend, a slow, gray drizzle that blurred the road ahead until everything looked like smoke. I kept both hands on the wheel, forcing my breath steady. Mason's words replayed again and again: widows, retirees, her name on their list, mine. When I reached the house, the key slipped in the lock twice before turning. The door creaked the way it always had. But tonight the sound felt cautious, like the house itself was holding its breath. Inside, everything was too neat, too still. The clock ticked carefully, as if afraid to be the first thing to break. I hung my coat and walked to the mantel. The wedding album waited there, edges still bright from the printer's gloss. I opened it. Clara was frozen mid-laugh, her veil catching light. Adrian stood just behind her, one hand on her back, his fingers pressing into the fabric of her dress. That hand used to look protective. Now it looked like possession. I closed the album and traced the cover with my thumb. "What have they done to her, Henry?" I said to the framed photo beside it. His smile, steady and patient, gave no answer. The rain grew heavier. I made tea and left it untouched. The minutes passed in uneven steps, half memory, half disbelief. Every promise I'd ever made to protect our daughter felt thin as paper. Near midnight, a sharp flutter moved through my chest, a quick pain that stole my breath for a moment. I pressed a hand against my ribs, counted until the rhythm returned. Old habit. Stay calm. Stay upright. No one else to steady you. I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark kitchen, listening to the rain slide down the windows. My hands were still trembling, but my voice was quiet when I spoke. She trusted him. I whispered, and I trusted her. The house answered with silence, careful, unbroken. I let it stand because tonight, even grief needed permission to stay small. Mason chose a quiet cafe near the ferry dock, the kind of place where people came to read and no one listened too closely. I spotted him by the window, his coffee untouched, his eyes heavy with something he hadn't yet said. "Mrs. Marsh," he greeted, standing too quickly. "Thank you for meeting me again." I sat across from him. "You said there was someone I should meet." He nodded toward the woman joining us from the counter, a dark coat, sharp eyes, and a badge clipped discreetly to her belt. "Detective Lila Chen." She introduced herself, extending a hand. "Seattle Financial Crimes Unit." Her voice carried no sympathy, only focus. "We believe Beckett and Wren Capital has been operating for years under multiple aliases. It's organized fraud targeting older investors. Your connection to the Becketts gives us a way in." I kept my tone level. "You want me to bait him?" "We'd never use that word," she said, but the corner of her mouth betrayed honesty. "We need evidence of intent. If you appear interested in investing your retirement savings, he'll approach you. Once he outlines the scheme, we can act." Mason leaned forward. "You wouldn't be alone, Mrs. Marsh. Everything would be monitored. We'll keep you safe." Safe. The word sat heavy between us. I looked at the small scratches on the table, the kind left by years of spoons and conversation. "I'm not afraid of him," I said. "I'm afraid of what it will do to her when this breaks." Detective Chen's expression softened just enough. "Then help us end it cleanly." I nodded once, the decision landing like the final entry in a ledger. "You rush. You ruin," I murmured. "Henry used to say that before every cut of wood." I suppose truth works the same way. When I returned home that night, I took Henry's old pen from its case and polished it with a cloth. The brass tip caught the lamplight, a tool of precision, not power. My hand felt steady again for the first time in days. Tomorrow. I would call my son-in-law and start the work of undoing his lies. Clara's condo sat high above the bay, all glass and polished wood. The place looked like it had been built to impress rather than to live in. Adrian opened the door before I could knock twice. His smile was practiced warm. Careful, measured. "Mom," he said, stepping aside. "You made it. Clara's still at the office, but she'll be home soon. Can I pour you some wine?" "Just a little," I answered, unclasping my coat. My voice felt steadier than my pulse. Inside my brooch, the tiny recorder hummed quietly, a secret pulse of its own. Adrian handed me a glass. "I heard you're thinking about retirement accounts again. Perfect timing, markets are moving in our favor." I tilted the glass, letting the wine catch the light. "I wouldn't know. I still keep my savings the way Henry did. Safe, small, boring." He laughed softly. "That's exactly what I help people outgrow. You've earned more than a simple savings account. Mom, you deserve your money to work for you." His charm slid neatly between words, just enough sincerity to hide the manipulation. "How does it work?" I asked. Feigning curiosity, he leaned against the counter. "We circulate funds through short-term overseas accounts. Completely legal, high returns, low risk. Clara could tell you how well it's done for us." I let my brow knit. "Overseas. That sounds complicated." "It's seamless," he assured. "You'd have full access. I'd personally handle the transfer. We'd start small, maybe 50,000, just to test the waters." I smiled as if impressed. 50,000, I repeated, slow enough to make it sound foreign. "Let me think on it." "I'd never make a move without reading every line," he chuckled. "I'd expect nothing less from you." When Clara came home, she kissed his cheek, oblivious. "See, I told you she'd come around." I hugged her gently, my heart stiff behind my ribs. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a single message from Detective Chen. "Not enough. We'll need a second meeting." I read it twice, then set the phone down beside Henry's pen. My reflection in the window looked calm, but the mask I wore was beginning to ache. Adrian called early in the morning, his tone brisk, rehearsed, ready to finalize. "Mom, I cleared my afternoon just for you. I told him I'd be there by noon." My hand shook only once when I ended the call, then steadied as I slipped Henry's old pen into my purse. His office overlooked the harbor glass walls. No warmth. Celeste's desk sat empty, her chair turned toward the window. "She's traveling for clients," Adrian said, straightening his tie. "We've both been working around the clock." He gestured to the sleek conference table where forms were neatly stacked, each corner perfectly aligned. "This is the simplest version," he said. "Funds move overseas temporarily, circulate through a holding account, and return in 90 days with compounded gains. Minimal risk, high yield." I sat opposite him, my brooch angled toward the light, the hidden recorder alive beneath the pearl. "From where exactly?" I asked, letting confusion edge my voice. He smiled the way men do when they believe they're teaching something. "From new investor inflows," he said easily, like any healthy cycle. "Early contributors support later ones, and it all balances out once we reach scale." The words landed heavy, final, exactly what Detective Chen needed. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice stayed even. "And you'd handle the transfer yourself?" "Of course," he said, leaning closer. "Your family." The office door opened quietly behind him. Adrian turned, expecting Celeste. Instead, Detective Lila Chen stepped through with 2 officers close behind. Her badge caught the light. "Adrian Beckett," she said evenly. "You're under arrest for securities fraud, elder exploitation, and financial conspiracy." He froze, color draining from his face. What is this?" His eyes darted to me. You set me up. I folded my hands in my lap, calm as the tide outside his window. No, Adrian, I said softly. You built the trap yourself. He tried to speak, but the officers moved faster, reading him his rights while the sound of handcuffs clicked sharp and clean. Detective Chen met my eyes briefly, her expression neither triumphant nor cruel, just certain. When it was over, the room felt hollow, like a ledger finally balanced. I reached into my purse, touched Henry's pen, and exhaled. The numbers had always told the truth. It only took time for the people to catch up. 3 days after the arrest, Clara came to my door. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hair unbrushed, her coat hanging loose on her shoulders. When I opened the door, she didn't step in right away, just stood there, eyes swollen from tears she must have run out of long before. "Mom," she said finally, her voice raw. He said it was legal, every bit of it. I let her in, guided her toward the kitchen table. The kettle was already on, as if my body had known she would come. Believing doesn't make it true, I said. She sat down hard, hands clasped together. I thought love meant trust. I thought that's what you always taught me. I took 2 cups from the shelf, set them on the table. Love does mean trust, I told her. But trust isn't blindness. It's seeing the truth and still choosing to care. Her chin trembled. I didn't see anything. Not the money. Not the lies. He said he'd build something for us for our future. I thought I was helping him. I placed a hand over hers. You were helping a dream, not a man. That's what he counted on. She wiped her eyes, shaking her head. Detective Chen called me. She said if I cooperate, it'll help with the charges. I told her I'd tell them everything. That's good, I said softly. The truth deserves company. Silence settled between us, heavy but not cruel. The kettle whistled. I poured the tea, the sound grounding us both. Steam rose between our cups like a small truce neither of us named. I don't expect you to forgive me, Clara said, her voice almost breaking. I don't need to, I answered. We'll just start from here. She nodded, eyes down, fingers circling the rim of her cup. For the first time in months, she looked like my daughter again, lost, but reachable. We drank our tea slowly. No apologies, no promises. Just the sound of rain against the windows and the quiet rhythm of 2 people trying to believe in something honest again. The evenings turned cool again. Autumn settled over Port Townsend with the quiet kind of beauty that asks nothing in return. I spent the afternoon tightening the screws on the porch light Henry had installed decades ago. The bulb flickered when I tested it, then glowed steady, soft, against the fading day. A car pulled up by the curb. Mason stepped out, carrying something wrapped in brown paper. His smile was gentle this time. No urgency. No guilt. Just relief. I thought you might want this, he said, handing it over. Inside was a framed photograph, one I didn't remember him taking. It was from the wedding, me laughing at something off camera, unaware of the lens. Sunlight caught in my hair. You never looked like a victim, Mason said quietly, even when everything broke. I studied the photo for a moment. Maybe that's what happens when you've already survived worse, I said. He nodded. They sentenced him this morning. 5 years. He pled guilty. I exhaled, not from satisfaction, but from release. Then it's done, almost, he said, and looked toward the mailbox. There's a letter for you after he left. I opened it on the porch steps. Clara's handwriting uneven. Hurried. Mom, thank you for not letting me fall further. I'm getting help. I'll write again soon. The paper trembled slightly in my hands, but my chest stayed calm. I folded it once, slid it inside the frame behind the photograph. Some things belong together, the truth, and the people brave enough to face it. The sky deepened to a dim gray blue. I switched on the porch light. its glow spilling across the wet leaves that lined the walk. The glass hummed faintly, warm beneath my fingertips. Through the window, Henry's photograph waited on the mantel. I set Mason's frame beside it. 2 moments of my life, one built on promise, one rebuilt on truth. The wind rose off the bay, sharp with salt. I drew my sweater close and whispered, "Some lessons bloom late, but they bloom." Then I turned toward the light and let it lead me inside.